Drive down MLK Boulevard in Chattanooga, and you will see a mural painted on the side of Chappie's Restaurant. It depicts a memorable milestone in the fight for civil rights in the scenic city. The sit-in of Howard students at a Woolworth lunch counter. That moment is also remembered in a poem written by State Representative Joanne Favors for a reunion for her classmates at Howard.
We are the class of 1960, a very special one indeed, for we started the civil rights movement in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Favors is one of the 9 civil rights leaders we are honoring. They are Chattanooga City Councilwoman Carol Burris, Tennessee State Representative Joanne Favors, the first African American elected to the Chattanooga City Commission, John Franklin Sr., organizer of the local chapter of Operation Push, Johnny Holloway, former longtime leader of Chattanooga's NAACP, Eddie Holmes, current Chattanooga NAACP leader, James Mapp, who brought about integration of our local schools, longtime pastor of New City Fellowship, Randy Neighbors, the first African-American Chattanooga police detective, Napoleon Donut Williams, a longtime civil rights activist, Reverend H.H. Wright. We asked each of our honorees why they became involved in civil rights, shocked by what they've witnessed at an early age.
In retrospect, I think that I really became involved in civil rights when I was probably around 12 years old. Emmett Till was my age. And when this happened with him, with the murder that occurred with him, we were just beginning in 7th grade to begin to read magazines, and having been reared up until that point in Chattanooga, I had not been to Mississippi and in rural areas, so I was not accustomed to that kind of situation. And it just seemed like it wouldn't have happened in the United States. I just couldn't believe it.
I had a teacher Miss McGee, Miss Rose McGee, who introduced me. She was telling us about our race and giving us some racial pride in civics. And so from that, I became interested and active in NAACP. I became a member in 1942. I became part of the executive committee in 1953. And I became president in 1959 and served 26 years.
God inspired me. That is moved because of my belief in God, because all are created equal. We all have rights, just being human on this nature. You know, we always talk about life, living in pursuit of happiness, or whatever that pie in the sky may be, you know, from the human rights side, but on the civil rights side.
From childhood, that I just feel like that that everybody's somebody. I just feel like that God created man to be somebody, and the least that anybody can do is give some service to somebody else. I think it came from growing up sharing. We had to share.
Hopefully fairness and objectivity of thought and action that purported to be within the best, my judgment, the best interests of Chattanooga as a whole.
I grew up in Atlanta, and my family was always very active in civil rights. So when I came here, we didn't call it civil rights, it was the right thing to do. In my Sunday school youth group, it was not at all unusual for somebody like a Hosea Williams to come and speak to us about people's rights, not about talking about religion, but walking the talk.
We had an accident right outside of Gaston, Alabama when I was very young. Greyhound bus hit us, and we had to go to the hospital. And we went to the first hospital. That was for white people. Now, this is the first experience I had of that kind of stuff. And that's the first time I saw my father cry because he couldn't protect and take care of his family.
We couldn't ride the front of the bus. The bus stopped right in front of my house. We had to go in there and put our money in the slot and get back off the bus and go to the back. You couldn't sit past that back door. Our friend Dr. King was marching in Birmingham and Montgomery. If you remember, that's where he got it changed. Refused to get up. Rosa Parks refused to get up out of what bus.
I was born in Memphis, and when I was 4, my father abandoned my family and basically sent my mother and us kids up to Newark, New Jersey, where my grandparents lived. Eventually, you know, we moved into city housing projects, and so there I was in a single-parent home in one of the worst cities in America, and often on welfare. And so it was in the Newark, New Jersey in the 60s, through race riots and through all the urban problems that were happening then, that I sort of became aware of the racial situation in America.
All 9 remember the past days of segregation with ugly images that they will never forget and days of struggle to reach equality.
It was a sense of having some control because, you know, we had signs still up that said colored only, white only. And I remember my mother pinching me away from a water faucet downtown. She just pinched me away from it because it said white only. And I didn't know. And I was really not wanting the water, as I recall. I was just wanting to play with the water faucet, really. But when she told me not to ever do that again.
I worked in the grocery store in the early 40s, and we had a milkman to come by, and he came by every day. He wanted to tell one of his nigger jokes, as you call them, and I told my boss I didn't like it, so he made him stop. And it was right after this that I started writing letters to the editor decrying segregation and racial discrimination. If we went to East Chattanooga, the white youth would make us run. So if we went to the South Side, after you grew up and get 18 or like, to see a girl, you had to run if they caught you. Now, these were blacks. One was white, these were blacks.
During the summer, when school was out, many of us played ball with the kids coming out of East Lake, which is predominantly white, and the kids coming out of Ridgedale, which is predominantly black. So you had a black community sandwiched between 2 white communities that played together on the sports side. But after that, you know, there was a struggle. There wasn't the effort to put any emphasis on recreation in our community. We had a little center there, but it had no resources in the center.
One time I was at a party and somebody used unkind words, racial words, about some people that weren't there. And I spoke up and said, you know, that really offends me. People got quiet and people had used the N-word, the awful N-word. And so one of the people looked at me and said, well, you must be an N lover. And I said, you know what? I really like all kinds of people, no matter what their color are. But you've hit my short suit. I hate bigots and racists. And I think you're one, and I think I need to leave. I wasn't invited back again. I knew that.
We used to go up on Cameron Hill. Y'all don't recognize that now because Cameron Hill used to be a beautiful place. And we used to go up there and slide down the hill on cardboard boxes. And it was a little white kid that used to play with us all the time. So I brought him home one day for lunch. And when I brought him home, my mother had a funny expression on her face, never seen it before. And I realized I must have done something wrong. But she fed both of them. We said, but I never invited them back because I kind of figured out that's what it was. And it was legal segregation at that time. And so, and that's when I had to be about 8 years old at that time, maybe 7 when I brought that little white boy home because we were sliding on cardboards going down Cameron Hill. And every time I look at Cameron Hill, I get mad.
I remember when we first went into Howard High School, there was a bomb threat. You know, there was a brand new black high school, and the Ku Klux was over there burning crosses on the back lot back there. Tried to intimidate us, but that didn't stop us because we always lived right there in the community of the Howard High School. So That didn't stop us. Why? This is a black high school. Why? In a black neighborhood. Why? We just wanted education.
And I will tell you frankly that growing up in that neighborhood, it wasn't always easy. You know, I was one of the few white people in the neighborhood, so I had gotten a lot of fights, and there was a lot of anger and bitterness in me, and a lot of wanting to escape my situation. But one of the really cool things was that God began to open my eyes that this was my community, this was my neighborhood, these were my people. And one of the African American girls who lived in the next building, we went to the same grammar school and the same high school, she would become my wife.
Some felt the obligation to make changes within the system. Others challenged the status quo and made history doing it, like James Mapp.
In the early 50s, I became a part of what they call the CGI, Citizens for General Improvement. We were the first to move to get schools desegregated in 1957. I will never forget that we went before the school board, and they were telling us how much they had worked, how hard they were working. This is after the 54 decision. And so I made the statement. I said, now, you may have been working hard. I said, work, as I understand it, means that something has to move. I said, if you push against a brick wall all day and it doesn't move, you haven't worked. And the Free Press came out the next day and said, pushing against a brick wall. At the same time, 1960, when we went to the school to desegregate, we had started on February the 5th, and to go take our kids and take them to Glenwood School. Glenwood School was where Memorial Hospital is now. And see, our kids were being bused out to 3 other schools for a half-day session, many of them. So, but that same day, we decided, went to our attorney, and somehow we didn't get to the school that day. 2 weeks later, we went back, and I've always said it was providential, because about 2 o'clock, we presented our children at Glenwood School. At 4 o'clock, the students at Howard, the first in the country of high school students, decided they would sit in downtown. Obviously, it was providential that they didn't know what we were doing, we didn't know what they were doing. We boarded the bus right here at 601 East M.L. King. It was 9th Street then. And we left that Friday evening, arriving there that Saturday morning, and went straight to the site. And the beautiful thing about it, they did not have to hire extra people to pick up paper or anything. There was not one arrest. We went in, we did what we were going to do, and came back. I had the chance of shaking Bobby Kennedy's hand. He's Attorney General. And, you know, I can remember because it was such a... So I met with the president, President Kennedy. Yeah, so I was there. And the mood of the people, no problems. They didn't have any problems anywhere along the way, because we wanted jobs and we wanted freedom.
In the meantime, the Unity Group was organized under the leadership of Dr. Paul McDaniel. And we were meeting at our funeral home. It was over here on Central Avenue. And the express purpose at that point, as I recall, was to try to find an African-American person who could run for the Commissioner of Education post in the city government. I felt obligated to give it a try. I led the ticket in the primary, but didn't have quite enough for the 50% plus one vote necessary for election. So Commissioner Peterson and I went into the runoff, head up. And in the runoff, I managed to win by about 2,000 votes. And it was really a surprise to me. I was on leave of absence. I was ready to go back into my job.
1968, I was the first black detective in the history of the Chattanooga Police Department. And I didn't get promoted until Dr. King got killed. 4 days later, they promoted me. All white detective division. And the first day I went on the job, I arrested 2 people for armed robberies. And the white detective was begging me to work with them the next day because I had contact in the community. As a patrolman, I knew everybody in town. It wasn't easy, but I worked in plain clothes a lot before they made it permanent. A black person in a detective division in the 60s, it wasn't popular. I had to be the best of the best.
A lady by the name of Mrs. Viola Mapp approached me and asked if I would volunteer with the NAACP. And she felt like that I would be a good person to come to work for the NAACP, and I agreed to do that. I have served as president of the local NAACP, served as chairman for the Chattanooga Human Rights and Relations Committee, I've been an EEOC employee counselor for a number of years, so I think I have a pretty good background in dealing with human rights and civil rights. A very good program that came that we were able to reinstitute here at the university. Again, I contribute that to Dr. Stacy when we reactivated the NAACP College chapter here. And from the very first group that started this program here locally, they still call me on a regular basis. I mean, they're all over the country, but they'll think about, Mr. Holmes, how you doing? Or if they hear that something is wrong, they stay in contact with me.
Now, politics was always beneath me. I think that's a word of saying I'm scared. When the phone rings, and a good friend said, Carol, this isn't a Republican or a Democratic call. This is a people call. We're wondering if you would be interested in running for office. My predecessor was being asked to leave office, and there was going to be a special election. And I listened, and I said, well, somebody said, I think it came from me. The real me was going,